But when you write a book, you've got to write that book and you've got to be very clear. People got to understand what the hell you're talking about. And so one of the nice things about it was if we got them to write a book, then we did their marketing or helped them promote the book. It was so much easier, right? I think in businesses, and it's a very interesting thing, right? If you solve people's problems, you make a lot of money, right? How can I make this message clearer, understandable, without confusing them too much, but being clear about what they're getting? And then that's tough, and particularly in software, because you can tell people, oh, they've got a million features, but they only want one thing. So actually, by telling them 20 different things, you've lost them, you confused them. And whereas you said, let's deal with your problem right now, but let's make sure that as through this process, we actually make sure that it's going to work for you, but making sure that you solve the problem they got. And that's what people don't do. They don't listen, right?
Yeah.
They try and solve all these other problems and then end up losing the customer because they actually didn't listen to the customer what he really wanted.
And that is coming up next on Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show, so stay tuned. So, the big question is this: how are ambitious people like us, who don't have a lot of resources, did not go to Ivy League colleges, were not born into wealth, how do we become resourceful enough, use our creativity, our dedication, and a little bit of crazy to bootstrap our way to realizing our dreams? Whether it is launching a new company, launching a new app, or making it to the top of the corporate ladder? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. We have created a tremendous community of bootstrappers, entrepreneurs, and professionals who are ambitious, resourceful, and want to get things done. We brainstorm, support, and help each other out. So come join us. Navigate to bootstrapping.group, join today, and get the Startup Founders Technology Accelerator video series absolutely free. If you enjoyed this video, then do let us know by hitting that like button now. Or if you want us to improve our content, then go ahead and hit that thumbs down button and give us your honest feedback in the comment section below. Here at Tetanoodle, we are passionate about entrepreneurship, technology, and innovation. Every week, we bring you insightful and engaging videos, interviews, tips, tricks, and strategies to help you grow your business or rise in your corporate profession. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing and do not forget to hit that bell icon so that you are notified when we publish new content. Hello and welcome to this new episode of Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show. I'm your host Manuj Aggarwal, and today we'll be talking with John North. John is a 5-time #1 international best-selling author, a versatile, experienced entrepreneur with a solid background in accounting, banking, finance, personal development, IT, marketing, and business management. So John is the CEO and founder of Evolve Systems Group. John's passion to help business owners became more strategic and smarter about their marketing efforts. He constantly pushes the envelope of what's possible in this modern era and is widely regarded among his peers as very innovative and highly creative in his approach. He recently launched a new online platform called evolvepreneur.app, which is designed to empower entrepreneurs, authors, coaches, consultants, and podcasters to be massively successful online. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Great to be on the show finally. We've had a few attempts to get here, haven't we?
Yeah, I know. It's always a challenge. When you're traveling, you're trying to build a business and launching new stuff. It's always a challenge to schedule these things. But I'm glad we are here, and I'm pretty sure the audience is going to get a lot of value out of this conversation.
Cool.
All right. So you have very interesting background. You have had tremendous amount of success. You've written many books. So let's start to know you a little bit better. Can you tell us a little bit about your life journey? How did you get to where you are today, and what kind of major events led to this level of success?
It's interesting, I think, because in one of the books I wrote, a bit of a story about how I sort of got into entrepreneurship, because what happened was I left school when I was about 15. I couldn't get out of there fast enough, and also I'd moved 13 times in 13 years, so I'd moved so many different schools and stuff like that. So one of the things that probably taught me in that process is to be resilient, right? Because the new kid always gets the person that gets picked on, and so I got very good at kind of being, tough and ready for that kind of stuff. So when I left school like 15 and a half or something, got a job working in a bank. And it was the first interview I ever did in my life, and I got the job. So basically, my interview experience, in fact, I've only had 2 interviews in my whole life, and I got offered both jobs. The second job I didn't take, but I basically worked there for 12 years, and they gave me so much experience in systems and processes, and customer complaints is a big one for banks, right? And so how to deal with people. So like people say, I teach about money. In fact, I don't think they taught me much about money at all. They taught me more about people. And so when I decided to quit the bank after about 12 years to start an IT business. So we started doing just when IT sort of hit, so accounting software, all that kind of stuff. And we started into everything. So we started selling accounting software, we moved into selling scanners, fax machines, you name it. We were selling everything because the technology, right, that was coming out so fast, no one really knew much about it. And we actually managed to get, it was a small town of, I don't know how many people, about 500,000, maybe less, a couple of 100,000. And we now managed to get to the top of the sort of dominating market there because we actually owned a fair chunk of the market. And that was simply by doing the hard work and being, basically getting good customers. So when when GST hit Australia, that was a new tax that came out. It basically demolished my business overnight. Basically, within probably a month, 80% drop in revenue.
Wow.
So we're in a situation where, what do we do now? Like, because GST had hit and this was like 1999, 2000s, there was nothing on the horizon. So I actually got a job for the first time in like 10 years, working for a software company. And when we got there, I actually moved to Sydney at that point. When I got there, I realised that they were in worse shape than I was. Like they were actually, I was like, my God, I've gone into something worse. So they said, we want to pull out of the country. Like they've been there 15 years, and they said, we want to leave. And I go, why do you want to leave? And I go, things are about to get interesting. And they go, no, we want to pull out. I said, well, how about I take it off your hands then? So we actually took the whole business off their hands, took over their customers, and we were ranked like 18th in the world for their sales. Wow. In the next 3 years, we actually managed to get to second in the world globally. Wow. And it was pretty basic stuff, but it's all the marketing I'd learned because prior to when I was doing the first business, I spent a lot of money on self-education. So I spent probably $100,000 on going to events and buying books and all that sort of stuff because really Google wasn't that useful back then. Anything even existed. And so I was in a situation where I was able to implement all that. And then eventually we sold out of that company and I started doing marketing for clients. And then we moved into book publishing because we realized that was a really easy way to crystallize what they'd done. And then realized, well, you got to eat your own dog food, right? So I started writing books. Funny enough, I actually wanted to write a book. I wanted to be a journalist when I was like 15. I got talked out of it because I did work experience. And they said, don't do it. Yeah. And so I always wanted to write books right back then, but it took me nearly 40 years to turn around and write a book. And then I try to commit to do one a year now. And so it was quite an interesting journey on that process. I mean, I was in the ambulance, I was in the SCS emergency services along the way. So I've done all these interesting things along the way. So it's been a very interesting way to kind of look at personalities and how people operate and what people do under pressure. All right, that's one of the interesting things.
Very cool, very cool. All right, and then how did you go from that? So are you still running that company, or did you sell off that company that you purchased?
Well, when we basically took over the Sage Accounting company in Australia, and basically I sold out of that company probably about 7 or 8 years later. I touched on it in the book I wrote about because it was a very difficult time for us. We actually went through a 7-year war. So part of the process of that business was that I had to get out of it because in the end we'd had to give up. And it's a very hard thing for an entrepreneur to give up, but I had to give up because there was too many things against me. Basically our supplier turned against us, and so we had to fight not only our supplier, we had to fight a competitor that they placed in the market against us. So I learned so much about survival, and we went through so many crazy times. And as I said, I could write a book about it, probably get sued. But do you know what I mean? Like it was just like an interesting time that we battled that for 7 years. And I look back now and think, was that really worth it? Should I have basically capitulated earlier? Maybe not. I don't know. But it was probably the most stressful time of my life.
That brings a very interesting question. So, you had challenges with sales in the first company.
Mm.
That some new regulation came in and changed the business overnight.
Change
This,
it tomorrow, yeah, and that's a funny thing about a lot of businesses. Like, look at taxis and Uber, right? Suddenly something changes, and you think
yeah,
everything's good,
yeah,
and even though you've got everything in place, you still get caught.
yeah, exactly. And then in the second case, obviously you had some challenges. So, uh, what were the key lessons? Like, if you were, if an entrepreneur came to you with similar situations, what insights can you give them that may save them some money, save them some time? Maybe you can say, get out of this business early because you struggled with it for 7 years. And what are the lessons that may have been useful to you in that
Yeah,
specific?
and I got real clear on those lessons too. So one of them was own your own brand. So what a lot of people do, and this is a distribution thing, right? So if you're running your own company and you've got your own products, well, that's a different story. But if you're distributing something like we were, so we didn't own our brand, we didn't really own our name either because our brand was all tied up with it. So when we lost that company, when we had to basically close it down or move away from it and let them take it over, we lost everything. We lost connection to the customers. We lost everything, like all except for the client. So what we've been doing along the way is we had a backup plan. We were selling. We had set up a whole new company. We were selling to new customers, shifting them across, so we owned them. So we never owned our customers, and that's one of the things that it's like to me, like social media and big tech is really the way it's going now. That you don't own your customer, right?
Yeah,
So it kind of extends out to that. So it's like warning bells for me when I look at it and think you don't own your customers. If you don't own your customers, you own nothing. And so we didn't have any brand connection. So basically, as soon as we lost that business, that was it. And the second part about it was trusting the supplier to look after you in a distribution environment. What happens is you either get too successful and they want to pull you down because you're too successful, or you're not successful enough and they want to terminate your agreement. So somewhere in between the two is the happy zone, and I don't know where that is, right? So we actually suffered from being too successful. We actually got too high up, we got too powerful, and basically they wanted to pull us back down again into the pot. And Australians are worse about this stuff. We don't like anybody sort of raising above too high. So what will happen is we'll kind of pull them back into the pot, and that's basically what happened to us. So being very careful about your brand, owning your customer, and really knowing that you own the entire process, because what happens is something happens like this. We had no control over the tax changes. We're selling accounting software. No one buys accounting software when they get freaked out with taxes. So basically everybody in Australia bought accounting software within a month,
Nice.
6 months period. That normally would take 5 years.
Nice.
So they sucked all the accounting sales out of the market in one go. We had no customers left. We didn't have a side business or anything. That was our business, right?
Got it. Well, that's a key lesson. So, and then to your comment, I think it's a universal human tendency to pull other people down. So
Yeah.
it's not Australia alone.
No.
But anyway, okay. So you sold this company. Good lessons learned. What happened next?
Well, I had this great idea that I was going to help people with marketing, right? So one of the things we did is we said, okay, I'm going to sign up 25 customers and I'm going to do all this marketing for them. And what we realized was that the amount of work involved to do this was so big and largely unappreciated too, because like one of the things we were doing was SEO work where we'd actually list them in all these directory sites, right? It's the most boring thing ever to do, right? Listing people on directory sites. It takes hours and hours and hours. Worthwhile, but do you know what I mean? So all these things were like huge jobs. And so we realized after I got like 5 customers, I realized how hard it was, right? I calculated how much time it was going to take. And part of the thing wasn't so much what we promised them as what I wanted to do. So I wanted to over deliver. I wanted to do more than just what we were charging them for.
Yeah.
So every time I did it, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to increase the price here. I can't handle this.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where we became virtually unaffordable because the price was too high. So that's when we kind of got into book publishing, because what we realized was that trying to help people with their marketing is such a big job. And they changed their mind a lot through that process because they're not clear, right? And so part of the problem was that they weren't clear about what they were trying to sell, what their mission was, nothing like that. So they go in and they couldn't tell me even who their customers were going to be. And so we couldn't help them, like, but when you write a book, you've got to write that book and you've got to be very clear. People got to understand what the hell you're talking about. And so one of the nice things about it was if we got them to write a book, then we did their marketing or helped them promote the book. It was so much easier, right?
I see.
Because it was crystal clear.
Got it.
And so we kind of moved into publishing because it was much easier, but we had all that marketing skill set that we just kind of applied to that process. So I basically essentially fired all those marketing clients along the way and said, look, I don't want to do it anymore. It's too hard.
So now is that the marketing business that has morphed into a publishing business?
Yeah, which then morphed into a software business.
Okay, so tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so what happens is, I think in businesses, and it's a very interesting thing, right? If you solve people's problems, you make a lot of money, right? And I think where we looked at this scenario was, what was after the book publishing? What's next, right? And so part of the problem is that once they've done their book, some people actually think that's the end of it, right? That I've done my book complete, let's move on to something else. In fact, they don't even market it anymore. I've seen them do it, right? They write a book and they forget about it. So tired after. So what we want to do is figure out a way to market the book. And then we started doing that for them. We realized so many different systems they needed to do it. One client we had had 10 different disparate systems trying to work together to do this, do what he needed to do. And I thought, I put my accounting software hat on and thought, gee whiz, isn't there a complete system out here that does all this? And so I went looking for it and couldn't find anything unless it was extremely expensive. So it wasn't accessible to this entrepreneur market. It was very expensive. Needed someone else to run it for them. And it becomes something, this can't be right. So we already had a basis of a product, so we just started developing it. So we developed a product that was designed to make them money off their website and allow them to actually do what they needed to do. Like, let's say, set up a podcast, set up a blog, sell products, create a course, right? All those things that they come to do, and they end up buying all these different products and systems and people to do it for them. And then I hear the horror stories after, because basically what's happened is they've either misunderstood what the hell they were doing, right? Or they just spent so much money and they didn't really get a result. And now they don't want to do it anymore, or they go, oh, I've lost all this money, what do I do now? And we used to get that with accounting software, by the way. So people implement an accounting system, realize they made a mistake because they didn't do enough planning in the first place and analysis, and then change systems and expect you to do it for free because they'd spent all their money on the previous guy.
Right. Those are the typical problems everybody faces. All right. And what are some of the lessons that you learned from this new venture? Maybe you can share a few lessons there.
I think one of the things that I've seen is people think if you build it, they will come. That doesn't. and so getting really clear about what you do. And it's interesting because what I found is if I try and sell this product, can I sell it? Can I explain it? And I learned through that process of going and saying, can I actually get someone convinced they like it and stuff like that, and test it and keep changing that spiel, if you like, or that pitch, so that people understand better and get clearer. And I think that's one thing that a lot of businesses do. They kind of pick a process and stick with what they say without looking at what people are responding to. And so one of the things I've learned is you've got to adapt until you get the right pitch and the right kind of messaging. And that can take a while. That can take years sometimes. So one of the things I'm constantly looking at is how can I make this message clearer, understandable, without confusing them too much, but being clear about what they're getting. And then that's tough, and particularly in software, because you can tell people, oh, they've got a million features, but they only want one thing. So actually by telling them 20 different things, you've lost them, you confused them. And whereas you said, let's deal with your problem right now, but let's make sure that as through this process, we actually make sure that it's going to work for you, but making sure that you solve the problem they got. And that's what people don't do. They don't listen, right? Yeah. They try and solve all these other problems and then end up losing the customer because they actually didn't listen to the customer what he really wanted.
Yeah. Cool. And so now let's move on. And I know you have done quite a bit of work in the entrepreneurial space, built in many businesses. I believe you have sort of synthesized your knowledge and experience into certain stages of business. Is that correct?
Yeah. So when I was writing my one of the books we did, and it's a kind of a discovery I made because we joined a new kind of course that came out talking about how to run a course, set up a course and stuff. And one of the things in that that product was a thing called Success Paths.
Okay.
And what I realized was Success Paths basically didn't just matter for courses, it matters for books as well. So if you're writing a book that actually has someone go through a process as opposed to, say, a literary thing, then where are they in the process, and where are they getting to? So we actually thought to myself, I need like 5 steps, right, or 5 sections or whatever to do it. So we come up with these 5 things that we thought business people would or entrepreneurs would fit into, and from my experience, what they would actually end up stuck in, if you know what I mean. Like they would get to a point where they thought they were. So we had things like founder, explorer, so what was the next one? Sorry, organizer. Sorry, I always forget organizer. Investor and time master, right? And so the idea behind it was that each level that they went through that process, and they had to do certain things. What we found was that they might be sitting and they might think they're investors, right? An investor is someone that's actually investing in their business, not investing in that stage. And so what they do is go, well, hang on a minute, you've missed all these other things at founder level, or you missed these things at organizer level. And so go back to that and make sure you've done those things. And that's kind of what we wanted to try and do, is pull them back down and say, hey, have you done this? This is why you can't go to the next level. And ultimately to be a time master, to be a person that actually can have a turnkey business. Because when you look at any successful business, it's a turnkey business. It doesn't necessarily require the owner to be completely involved in it. And that was kind of the goal.
And can you go a little bit deeper into these stages, and what are the sort of the characteristics of each stage? What are kind of the responsibilities?
Sure.
I'd love to know, I'll explore a little bit deeper into these.
So it was interesting because when I wrote the book, then it allowed me the freedom of actually sliding things into each section, right? So it was a lot easier to write that book. In fact, the book I think I wrote in about 2 weeks because I had all the content. I just had to slide them into the content. And so if you look at founder level, that's someone who's suddenly got a great idea, who suddenly wants to do something, and they want to start a company. And usually that, and there's a book called The E-Myth, which you may have read, and it talks about entrepreneurial seizures, right? And I think that's what it is. The founder level is like a seizure, right? But the trouble is that they don't go through that process well enough sometimes, and they end up starting a company that's actually is going to fail because they didn't think things through properly. So asking all the tough questions at the start, working out whether it's going to be a viable business, doing some testing, doing all those things that you need to do before you start a business, but you get so excited you think I'll do that later. And so all those tough questions you need to ask yourself about, is you going to find a customer? Is it a scalable business? Can you maybe sell it down the track? What's your plan down the track? All those questions they never ask. One of the things we actually write in there is about writing your own eulogy, right? And a lot of people find that pretty tough, right? But the idea is you're almost going back in time and seeing where the picture looks like at the end. And sometimes that can change it. And that's what happens with book publishing, by the way. When we do a book for someone and they're writing a book from scratch and they don't really have a great idea of what they want to write about, they will change their mind 1,000,000 times through that process. I've seen them happen every time. They go, oh, hang on a minute, I hadn't thought about that. Gee, that's completely wrong. And so that initial process. And then you kind of move into explorer mode, which is what you're trying to figure out is, can you sell it? What's the price going to be? What's your target market? All those kind of business plan stuff to a degree. Working out what systems you might use, all that kind of thing. But it's basically at explorer level. So you're not really making any decisions, you're just thinking about what you're going to do. So maybe it's a test run or something like that. Organizer is basically when you're going to organize your business, right? And this is the step that most of them miss. So they go straight up to the next one because they don't want to have to, write procedures or basically put too many systems in place and things like that because they're on their own, right? Yeah. Sometimes these guys are on their own sometimes, so they don't want to be regimented. So what they do is they kind of skip it. And then what happens is when you get to the investor stage where you're actually starting investing money in your business, you don't have proper systems in place to handle it. Yeah. You employ the wrong people and the whole thing falls over. And that organizer level is really the level that most people don't want to do. Okay. And we sort of talk about how you can get around that, what you should be making sure you've got in place. Sometimes you should, like a wise man once said to me, if you're going to hire staff, the first person you should hire is a general manager, not a doer, right? Get the general manager to manage your business and then hire other people to help and let them run those people. And then you've basically got that gap between you and those staff that they're training. And they're not relying on you all the time. So that's the first tough one that most people won't do. And then once you've got to investor levels, how do you invest in your business? Is it viable? What sort of, how are you going to promote it? All those kind of things. Then ultimately, if you do everything right, you get to be a time master. And then what happens then? What do you really want to do? What's your passion? Because a lot of people get to a point where sometimes they actually get to a point where the business is running without them, and then they get bored and they start doing drastic things, right? So it's like, you've got to turn yourself into a different sort of person, and that's really, that could be a stage where somebody might have 2 or 3 staff and get to that level. Nowadays it's easier with systems and automation. Well, they could have a couple of 100 staff. It just depends on, but that's all about mindset, is getting to a point where, okay, now I've built this business, how do I make it bigger? How do I expand it? So that's kind of the journey that most people go on.
Awesome, that's great. And what about the theme of the show is bootstrapping? So, what is your opinion about bootstrapping versus raising money? When to raise money? How much to raise money? Any opinion on that?
I think, and I've been through this, I actually went through a whole process. When we were selling the Sage accounting software, we decided to start another software company just for the fun of it, right? And so we basically needed to raise funds for this thing because it was basically going to be a large launch. We probably needed a couple $1 million. So we went through a whole process of actually setting up the paperwork, and because I don't know where in certain countries, but in Australia there's got like a thing called second board, which means you can go out to sophisticated investors and you can ask them for money, but you can't take too many on, and they've got to know what they're getting into, right? So you make up this prospectus. So we went through this whole process. We had one person come in and see us. At the end of that conversation, they were fairly keen, but we realised we were about to give up all control of our company because the conversation was all about, what are we going to do in the future? How are we going to sell this? How are we going to get our money back? And we realised that person coming in there was coming in for a different reason, right? Most investors come in to get in and get out. They're not there for the long haul.
Yeah.
So if you don't get clear of that and you take the money, then you're in big trouble, because what's going to happen is you're going to end up being pushed out of your own company. There's been cases where we saw where you actually ended up with the wrong shareholding mix and got voted off the board, all right? So you could actually lose it. So to me, that's very dangerous unless you know what you're getting into. Bootstrapping is a much nicer way to do it. I've always bootstrapped stuff because I've always looked at self-fund it yourself. The danger is you maybe can't grow as fast.
Yeah.
But also the danger is you get too much money and you blow it too quick, and what happens is then you've got no revenue coming in, or very little, and you've spent all this money and you're behind the 8 ball. So I think if a business is going to be successful, and I think you look at like ClickFunnels as a good example of that, right? They took no investors on, and they basically had a funnel to make money at the front end of their advertising in order to actually make some more money in the back end to fund their business, right? And to me that makes a lot of sense, because if you can't sell your product and make money out of it, then getting an investor is just going to make it worse, right? You haven't thought that through. So,
for sure.
And I think be prepared to fail too.
Right?
I think be prepared to fail fast, right? So the downside of going into investor mode is you get so committed to that you can't change direction. But if you're actually doing a new business and it doesn't work for you, and you can see the writing on the wall, and you get out of it, no big deal, right? Refund some customers, walk away. But if you've gone into an investor scenario and you got that wrong, then you've got some real problems on your hands, right?
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I'm glad we are on the same page there, and obviously you've got tremendous amount of experience dealing with this. So that's sound advice. Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of the interview. Now, before I let you go, can you tell us a little bit about your books, how people can buy them, how they can get in touch with you, and maybe hire you for yourself?
Cool. All right, so I've probably done 5 books. I did one on squash, so that's probably not as relevant to your audience. I squash the game, not the thing. So we've got a book called 5 Stages of Entrepreneurial Success, and that's basically what I've been talking about with all those sort of things. It's available on Amazon whenever good books are sold, or you can go to johnnorth.com.au and all my books are up there. And the recent one we did was the book Publishing Secrets for Entrepreneurs, which was designed to give someone a process-driven way of doing a book, mainly so we could give it to our customers and tell them what to do in terms of the process. So we've got a website called evolveglobalpublishing.com if they want to have a look there. We've got tons of resources and things like that. So really, if someone's looking to write a book or want to build a system or platform, that they're trying to get, then happy to talk to them.
Great. Well, thank you so much once again for being with us, and hope you have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
And that's all for now. Until next time. Now, if you're an entrepreneur or a career professional, then I invite you to join our growing community. Navigate to bootstrapping.group. As a welcome bonus, you will get the Startup Founders Technology Accelerator video series and Mastering Your Inner Game video series absolutely free. This series of short videos address some core issues which are instrumental in helping you move forward in your business or career. The videos are yours to view and share for free. No obligations or strings attached, except for one. You have to take action and implement it. So join us today. Navigate to bootstrapping.group. If you want more engaging videos and insightful interviews with industry's thought leaders, then check out the other videos we have picked for you. The link is right there. And if you want to be notified about our new content, please do consider subscribing to our channel.